Jake is at a party. Someone's telling a story. Loud, confident, wrong about almost everything. Everyone's laughing. Jake knows the guy's wrong. He could correct him. He's running the correction in his head right now, refining it, anticipating the counter-arguments, realizing the correction would make him look pedantic, realizing he cares about looking pedantic, hating that he cares, wondering why he came, checking his phone, thinking about leaving, thinking about what he'd do if he left, probably just sit at home and think about this moment. The guy finishes his story, everyone cheers. Jake says nothing. He's exhausted. He's been here 40 minutes. Dostoevsky had a word for what Jake has. He called it a sickness. To be overly conscious is a real, absolute sickness. See, in 1864, Dostoevsky created a monster. Not the kind with fangs or claws, the kind that lives in your head. He wrote a 100-page monologue from inside the mind of a man who thinks too much, and he made it so accurate that people have been recognizing themselves in it for 160 years. The book is called Notes from Underground. The narrator doesn't have a name, he's just the underground man. He's 40 years old. He's retired from a low-level government job. He lives alone in a shabby apartment in St. Petersburg, and he talks. That's all he does. He talks to us, to himself, to imaginary critics he keeps anticipating and arguing with before they've said anything. He's not telling a story. He's performing a diagnosis, his own. Here's the first thing you need to understand. The underground man isn't stupid. That's the trap. When people hear man living alone in a basement, bitter and paralyzed, they picture a loser. Someone who couldn't hack it, someone whose complaints are just excuses for failure. The underground man is smarter than everyone around him. He knows it. That's the problem. He sees through everything. Social conventions. He sees the performance, other people's motivations. He sees the selfishness underneath. His own motivations. He sees those too, which is worse. He can't do anything without simultaneously observing himself doing it, judging himself for doing it, predicting how others will judge him, and constructing counter-arguments to those judgments. His mind never stops. It's not a tool he uses. It's a cage he lives in. There's a concept in psychology called metacognition, thinking about thinking. Everyone does it sometimes. You make a decision, then you evaluate whether it was a good decision. Normal. The underground man is trapped in metacognition. He can't just think. He thinks about his thinking. Then he thinks about the thinking about the thinking. It's mirrors reflecting mirrors. There's no ground floor. He describes the sensation of wanting to do something, anything, and watching his mind immediately generate objections. He wants to confront a man who insulted him. But what's the point? The man won't care. And if he does care, so what? And why do I care if he cares? And what does it say about me that I care? And now I'm analyzing instead of acting, which means I've already lost, which means nothing happens. He stands there. The moment passes. This isn't laziness. It's not cowardice exactly. It's something harder to name. The paralysis of seeing too clearly. Dostoevsky has the underground man explain it directly. He says that a man of acute consciousness, his phrase, can never become anything. Not a hero, not an insect. Nothing. Because becoming something requires kind of blindness. You have to not see the objections. You have to not notice the absurdity. You have to be, in some crucial way, stupid. The man of action acts because he mistakes secondary causes for primary ones. He thinks he knows why he's doing what he's doing. He doesn't. But his ignorance is his power. He moves. He accomplishes things. He's wrong about almost everything, but his wrongness doesn't slow him down. The underground man sees the errors. He sees that every justification is incomplete, every motive is mixed, every action is slightly absurd. And the seeing stops him cold. He's too smart to believe his own reasons. So he has no reasons. So he does nothing. Here's where it gets interesting. The underground man doesn't want to be cured. You'd think he would. He's miserable. He describes his condition as a sickness. He knows he's trapped. A reasonable person would want out. But when he imagines the alternatives, becoming one of those confident, active men who moves through the world without second guessing, he recoils. He'd rather suffer in his basement than become one of them. Because becoming one of them would require giving up the one thing he has: his awareness. The underground man is proud of his sickness. Not happily proud, bitterly proud. He knows things other people don't. He sees what they're blind to. Yes, the seeing is destroying him, but at least he's not a fool. This is the trap within the trap. Intelligence becomes identity. You'd rather be a miserable genius than a happy idiot. And so you stay miserable because the misery is proof that you're not like them. There's a moment in the book where the underground man imagines a different kind of person. The man of nature and truth, he calls him. This is the guy who doesn't think too much. When he's angry, he acts on his anger. When he wants revenge, he takes it. He's like a bull charging at a red cape, direct, uncomplicated. The underground man envies this man and despises him. And envies him again. He envies the simplicity, the ability to just do things without the infinite regress of self-analysis. But he can't respect it because the simplicity is also stupidity. The bull doesn't know it's being manipulated by the cape. The man of action doesn't know his reasons are rationalizations. They're happier, but they're wrong. And being wrong, to the underground man, is worse than being unhappy. This is the hierarchy he's constructed: truth above comfort, awareness above peace. He's made his suffering into a moral achievement. He's losing, but he's losing for the right reasons. Now here's the twist that most people miss. Dostoevsky wasn't celebrating the underground man. He wasn't saying, look how noble it is to be conscious. He was showing the dead end. The underground man is right about a lot of things. That's what makes him compelling. But being right has made him unable to live. At one point, the underground man describes the fantasy of a crystal palace, a perfect society built on rational principles, so where everyone's needs are met and everyone behaves logically. This was a real idea in Dostoevsky's time. Utopian socialists like Nikolai Chernyshevsky believed that with enough reason, enough planning, enough correct information, you could build paradise. The underground man's response: even if you built it, I'd blow it up. Not because he wants suffering, because he wants proof that he's free. The Crystal Palace is a cage made of logic. Every rational argument points toward it. If you accept the premises, you have to accept the conclusion, and that have to is intolerable. The underground man would rather do something stupid, something against his own interest, than be a machine following a program. This is spite as philosophy. If the rational path leads to happiness, he'll take the irrational path to prove he's not a calculator. His perversity is his freedom, the only freedom he has left. There's a rabbit hole here about free will that Dostoevsky keeps returning to. The underground man's spite isn't random. It's a response to a specific threat. The idea that humans are predictable, that if you knew enough about someone's brain, their history, their circumstances, you could predict their every action. That free will is an illusion. This terrified Dostoevsky, not because he thought it was wrong, he wasn't sure it was wrong, but because of what it implied. If humans are just complex machines, then consciousness is a curse. You're aware of your own programming, but unable to change it. You watch yourself execute code. The underground man's spite is his attempt to break the code, to do something, anything. that wasn't determined in advance. Even if the something is self-destructive, even if it makes no sense, at least it's his. This is why intelligent people often self-sabotage, not because they don't know better, because knowing better is the problem. They know what they should do. The should feels like a cage, so they do something else, something dumb, something harmful, just to prove they're not machines following instructions. The intelligence that sees the optimal path is the same intelligence that rebels against being optimized. There's another layer to the underground man that's easy to miss. He's funny, not funny like a comedian. Funny like someone who's found the absurdity in his own suffering and can't stop pointing at it. He mocks himself constantly. He anticipates that we're judging him, and he judges himself first, harsher. He describes his own vanity, his own pettiness, his own ridiculous grudges, and there's something almost joyful in the exposure. This is the intelligence turning on itself in a different way, not just paralysis, performance. He's made his suffering into material. He's the narrator of his own disaster, and there's a craft to the narration. I think this is part of why the book survives. The underground man is miserable, but he's not boring. His mind, the thing that traps him, is also the thing that makes him interesting. The same awareness that prevents him from acting gives him something to say. He's turned his cage into a stage. Maybe that's all any of us can do. The mind won't stop. The analysis won't end. But you can describe the analysis. You can make the trap visible, and in making it visible, you're doing something, even if the something isn't escape. Dostoevsky wrote notes from underground at one of the worst points in his life. His first wife, Maria, was dying of tuberculosis. His brother Mikhail had just died. The literary magazine they ran together was failing. He was broke, sick, grieving, and he sat down and wrote a man in a basement who couldn't stop thinking. There's something autobiographical in that. Dostoevsky knew the inside of this trap because he lived there. The gambling addiction that would consume him for the next decade, that's underground man logic. He knew it was destroying him. He did it anyway. The perverse freedom of self-destruction. But Dostoevsky also escaped, somehow. He wrote his way through it. He put the underground man on paper, and in doing so, he became something other than the underground man. He made the sickness into art. He used the curse. That's not a cure. The underground man doesn't get cured. He just keeps talking. But the talking is something. The examination is something. Even if the mind won't stop, you can turn what it produces into something outside yourself. Here's what the underground man teaches, if he teaches anything. You're not crazy. The things you see, the absurdity, the contradictions, the gap between what people say and what they mean, those are real. Your mind isn't malfunctioning. It's functioning too well. It's showing you things that would be easier not to see. But the seeing by itself leads nowhere. You can spend your whole life in the basement cataloging the world's stupidity and never do anything. You can be right about everything and accomplish nothing. You can watch the confident fools stumble forward and succeed while you stand still, or perfectly aware of why standing still is the only honest response. The underground man is a warning, not a model. Dostoevsky put him on the page to show what happens when intelligence has nowhere to go, when consciousness curls in on itself, when the mind becomes a prison and the prisoner starts to love the bars because at least they're his. You recognize him because he's in you. The part that would rather analyze than act. The part that sees objections before it sees possibilities. The part that's exhausted after 40 minutes at a party because being around unreflective people is its own kind of labor. That part isn't going away. Dostoevsky didn't get rid of his. He just found a way to use it. He gave it a job, describing itself, understanding itself, putting itself into words so precise that 160 years later, you're still nodding along. The sickness doesn't have a cure, but it has a function, and finding the function is the closest thing to relief you're going to get. There's a study that researchers don't like to talk about. It's actually a series of studies conducted over decades in different countries with different methodologies, and they keep finding the same thing. Intelligence correlates with misery. Higher IQ is associated with higher rates of anxiety, higher rates of depression, higher rates of what psychologists carefully call existential concern, which is a clinical way of saying you lie awake at 3 a.m. wondering if anything matters. Gifted children, the ones who test off the charts, the ones everyone says have such potential, show elevated rates of mood disorders compared to their peers. Mensa members, the top 2% by IQ, report more anxiety, more depression, more allergies, more autoimmune disorders than the general population. The brain that processes faster also, apparently, suffers faster. This isn't what we're told. The story's supposed to be, smart people have it easier. They get better grades, better jobs. They see solutions others miss. They navigate the world more effectively. Some of that's true, but the navigation comes with a cost nobody advertises. Why would intelligence make you suffer? One theory is evolutionary mismatch. Your brain evolved on the savannah, where the smart monkey was the one who spotted the predator before it attacked, who noticed the clouds that meant drought, who imagined disasters before they happened. That's adaptive when there are actual predators, when the drought is real, when imagination maps onto genuine threats. But you don't live on the savannah. You live in a world where most of the dangers are abstract. And your threat detection system, finely tuned over millions of years, has nothing concrete to detect. So it scans for threats in your career, your relationship, your health, your future, your past, your identity. It does what it evolved to do. It worries. But there's nothing to actually fight or flee from. Just a vague sense that something is wrong, something is coming, something needs to be solved. The intelligent mind is a surveillance system pointed at your own life. It's very good at its job. That's the problem. There's another angle. Intelligence correlates with pattern recognition, the ability to see connections others miss. This is useful for solving problems, building systems, understanding complexity. It's less useful for peace of mind. Because once you start seeing patterns, you can't stop. Like you see the pattern in how your boss talks to you versus how he talks to your colleague. You see the pattern in how your girlfriend's texts have gotten shorter over the past month. You see the pattern in your own behavior, the cycles of motivation and collapse, the same mistakes repeating, the slow accumulation of evidence that you might not change. Ignorance is a kind of protection. You don't notice the slight. You don't track the trend. You live in the immediate moment without the weight of all the moments that came before and all the moments you can predict coming after. Intelligence strips that protection away. You're left standing in the cold, seeing clearly, unable to go back inside. Schopenhauer figured this out 200 years ago. Arthur Schopenhauer, German philosopher, world-class pessimist, and possible inspiration for every goth kid who ever lived, argued that suffering was proportional to consciousness. The more aware you are, the more you suffer. An oyster barely suffers. It has almost no consciousness. It exists, it filters water, it doesn't know it's an oyster. A dog suffers more. It has memory, anticipation, a self that can be hurt. A human suffers more than a dog. We have abstract thought. We can suffer about things that haven't happened, things that might never happen, things that happen to people we've never met. We can suffer about suffering itself and a genius, someone with heightened sensitivity, heightened awareness, heightened capacity to perceive and process. Schopenhauer thought they suffered most of all. The instrument is more finely tuned. It picks up more signal, including the signals you'd rather not receive. Dostoevsky read Schopenhauer. You can feel it in The Underground Man, the same diagnosis, filtered through Russian intensity. The idea that consciousness itself is the problem. That the cure, if there is one, would have to involve becoming less aware, which is another way of saying becoming less yourself. There's a phrase from Ecclesiastes that keeps showing up when people write about this. It's 3,000 years old. For in much wisdom is much grief, and he that increaseth knowledge increaseth sorrow. This is in the Bible, the book of wisdom literature. And the wisdom being offered is wisdom hurts. The writer of Ecclesiastes, traditionally Solomon, the wisest king, spends the whole book cataloguing what he's seen. Everything is vanity. Everything passes. The wise man and the fool both die and are forgotten. You can work your whole life and leave everything to someone who didn't earn it. The race isn't to the swift. Time and chance happen to everyone. It's not a cheerful book. It's the document of an intelligent man surveying existence and finding it wanting. Not because he's depressed, or not only because he's depressed, but because he's seeing clearly. And what he sees doesn't add up to meaning. 3,000 years, Ecclesiastes to Schopenhauer to Dostoevsky to you, staring at the ceiling at 3 a.m. The diagnosis hasn't changed. Modern psychology has a framework for part of this. It's called terror management theory. The basic idea, developed from Ernest Becker's book, The Denial of Death, is this. Humans are the only animals who know they're going to die. This knowledge is unbearable. It would paralyze us if we faced it directly. So we build defenses. Culture is a defense. Religion is a defense. Achievement is a defense. We construct systems of meaning that let us feel like our lives matter, like we'll leave something behind. Like death isn't really the end, or at least isn't the whole story. Most people stay successfully defended. They don't think about death much. When they do, the cultural buffers kick in. The belief in heaven, the importance of their legacy, the business of daily life that crowds out the existential dread. The intelligent mind keeps poking holes in the defenses. It notices that the legacy won't last, that the meaning is constructed, that the cultural buffers are just shared agreements to not look too closely. It sees the machinery behind the show, and seeing the machinery doesn't make you free. It makes you unable to enjoy the performance. There's a term from psychology research, depressive realism. It refers to a finding replicated in multiple studies that depressed people are actually more accurate in certain judgments. They estimate their own abilities more correctly. They predict outcomes more realistically. They're less prone to the optimistic biases that make healthy people feel better about themselves than the evidence warrants. Non-depressed people tend to overestimate how much control they have. They remember their successes more than their failures. They think they're more liked, more competent, more likely to succeed than they probably are. Depressed people don't have these illusions. They see more clearly, and the clarity correlates with depression. This is uncomfortable. It suggests that mental health might require a certain amount of self-deception. That seeing yourself and your situation accurately is actually a risk factor for suffering. That the realistic view is the depressing view. The intelligent mind is drawn to accuracy. It wants to see things as they are. It finds the comfortable illusions embarrassing. The self-help affirmations, the positive thinking, the motivated reasoning that makes people feel better at the cost of being wrong. But maybe the illusions aren't just weakness. Maybe they're functional. Maybe the happier people aren't happy despite being wrong. They're happy because they're wrong. And the intelligent refusal to be wrong is also a refusal to be happy. There's a type of OCD that therapists call existential OCD or philosophical OCD. It's not about hand washing or checking locks. It's about thoughts. The person gets stuck on questions that don't have answers, or rather, that have answers they can't accept. What if nothing is real? What if I'm the only conscious being? What if there's no free will? What if life has no meaning? These aren't unusual questions. Most people have them occasionally, but the person with existential OCD can't let them go. Their mind keeps returning, keeps seeking certainty that doesn't exist. They research philosophy compulsively. They argue with themselves. They feel like they can't function until they resolve the question, and the question is unresolvable. Therapists treat this like other forms of OCD, exposure, acceptance, learning to tolerate uncertainty. But there's something poignant about it. The person isn't irrational. The questions are real questions. Philosophy has been struggling with them for millennia. The problem isn't that they're thinking about it. The problem is that they can't stop. High intelligence is a risk factor for this kind of loop. The smarter you are, the more capable you are of generating arguments on every side. The more clearly you see that certainty isn't available. The more your mind spins in the space where an answer should be. Here's what all of this points to. Intelligence isn't just a processing speed. It's a way of being in the world, a stance, a relationship to reality that emphasizes seeing over believing, accuracy over comfort, pattern recognition over peace. And that stance has costs. You can't unknow what you know, you can't unsee the patterns. You can't rebuild the defenses once you've seen their just constructions. You can't become less conscious. Or you can, through substances and distraction, but the consciousness is there when the substances wear off, when the distractions end. The underground man understood this. His bitterness wasn't just temperament, it was the accumulated weight of seeing things he couldn't unsee. Each insight was a door that locked behind him. Each moment of clarity took him further from the comfortable fog most people live in. Dostoevsky wasn't offering a way out. He was mapping the territory, showing what it looks like in here, in the mind that won't turn off. And the map is accurate. That's why it hurts to read. Not because it's exaggerating, because it isn't. There's one more thing Schopenhauer said that's worth sitting with. He argued that the only real escapes from suffering were aesthetic contemplation, losing yourself in art, in beauty, in something that takes you out of your own wanting, and, eventually, a kind of resignation. Not despair, something quieter. Acceptance that the will keeps wanting, the mind keeps churning, the suffering keeps coming, and a decision to stop fighting it. He wasn't recommending suicide. He was recommending something stranger, watching your own mind the way you'd watch a storm. Not trying to stop it, just observing. This isn't a cure. The intelligent mind would probably analyze the observation, then analyze the analysis. That's what it does. But maybe there's a moment, brief, hard to hold, where you see the whole thing from outside. The suffering and the sufferer, the thoughts and the thinker, the pattern that you are. And in that moment, you're not trapped inside it. You're watching it, like Dostoevsky watched the underground man, like you're watching yourself right now, recognizing yourself in these words. That's something. It's not peace, but it's something. The underground man never does anything. That's his whole deal. He thinks, he analyzes, he spirals, but he never acts. The paralysis is total. By the end of the book, he's still in his basement, still talking, still stuck. But what happens when the intelligent man forces himself to move? When he overrides the paralysis and does something? Dostoevsky wrote that book too. It's called Crime and Punishment. And the answer is the mind that wouldn't let him act becomes the mind that won't let him live with what he's done. Raskolnikov is a student. Was a student. He's dropped out. He's living in a coffin-sized room in St. Petersburg, a room Dostoevsky describes as more like a cupboard than an apartment. He's broke. He's barely eating. He's been lying on his couch for weeks thinking, and he's developed a theory. See, the theory goes like this. Humanity is divided into two categories: ordinary people and extraordinary people. The ordinary ones follow rules. They're the masses, the material, the background noise of history. They live, they reproduce, they die. They don't matter. The extraordinary ones, Napoleon, Caesar, the lawgivers and conquerors, they make the rules. They step over obstacles. When an ordinary person stands between them and their goal, they remove the person. They have to. That's what makes them extraordinary. They have the right to transgress because their transgression serves a higher purpose. Raskolnikov has decided he's extraordinary, and he's going to prove it. The target is a pawnbroker, an old woman named Alyona Ivanovna. She's cruel, exploitative, a louse, Raskolnikov's word. She takes advantage of desperate people. The world would be better without her. And Raskolnikov needs money. He can barely afford to eat. But that's not really why he does it. He does it to answer a question. The question that's been eating him for months. Am I extraordinary or ordinary? Am I Napoleon or am I the masses? Do I have the right to step over, or am I just another insect who follows rules because he's too weak to break them? There's only one way to find out. He has to do the thing an extraordinary man would do. He has to kill her. The logic is airtight. Given the premises, the conclusion follows. Raskolnikov has thought it through from every angle. He's anticipated the objections, constructed the counter-arguments. His mind has built a perfect case. So he picks up an axe and he walks to her apartment. Or here's what Dostoevsky shows. The body doesn't care about the theory. Raskolnikov commits the murder. He also accidentally kills the pawnbroker's sister, Lizaveta, who walks in at the wrong moment. An innocent, not part of the plan. Just a woman in the wrong place, and now she's dead too. And immediately, before he's even left the apartment, everything starts falling apart. Not externally. He gets away with it. He's not caught for most of the novel. The detective Porfiry suspects him but has no proof. Raskolnikov could walk free, the perfect crime, but his body rebels. He gets feverish, delirious. He can't sleep, he can't eat. He returns to the crime scene compulsively, drawn back to the apartment, to the bloodstain, to the place where his theory met reality. He practically confesses to everyone he meets, dropping hints, making bizarre statements, daring people to accuse him. His mind built the justification. His psychology was not consulted, and his psychology is rejecting the transplant. This is Dostoevsky's critique of pure intelligence. It doesn't account for what you're made of. Raskolnikov's theory was rational. Given his premises, some people are extraordinary. Extraordinary people have the right to transgress. The pawnbroker was a louse. The murder made sense. He could defend it philosophically. He probably could have won a debate about it. But humans aren't philosophical positions. We're animals with nervous systems. We have guilt built into us at a level below argument. We have empathy we can't override with logic. We have bodies that know what we've done even when our minds construct elaborate justifications. The intelligent man is especially vulnerable to this mistake. He lives so much in his head that he forgets he has a body. He thinks that if the reasoning is sound, the action will be clean. He doesn't account for the flesh, the nightmares, the way his hands will shake when he sees a police officer. Raskolnikov thought he was committing an idea. He was actually committing a murder, and the difference between those two things is what the novel is about. There's a detail that matters. Raskolnikov can't use the money. He takes the pawnbroker's purse. He grabs some items to pawn later, and then he hides everything under a rock in a courtyard and never touches it again. He didn't do it for the money. He told himself he did. The theory included something about using the money for good, helping his family, funding his education. But when it came time to actually benefit from the crime, he couldn't. Because it was never about the money. It was about proving something. And you can't spend proof. You can only carry it. The intelligent man often does this. Constructs elaborate practical justifications for something that's actually about identity. I'm starting this business because of the market opportunity. I'm ending this relationship because of compatibility issues. I'm doing this thing because of reasons, good reasons, reasons I can defend. And underneath, I need to know who I am. I need to answer a question about myself. The practical stuff is scaffolding. The real architecture is psychological. Raskolnikov's theory has a name, or several names. The Napoleon complex, the great man theory of history, the Übermensch. But though Nietzsche was writing around the same time, and they developed the ideas independently, the core claim, some people are above conventional morality. The rules are for the masses. The exceptional individual operates by a different code. It's a seductive idea, especially for intelligent young men. If you've spent your life being smarter than the people around you, seeing what they miss, understanding what they don't, it's easy to slide into thinking you're different in other ways too. Special, exempt. The classroom was easy. Social rules were easy to decode. Everyone else seemed to be operating with less information than you. Why wouldn't that continue? Why wouldn't your superiority extend to ethics, to law, to the constraints that bind ordinary people? Dostoevsky's answer is brutal, because you're not Napoleon. You're a student in a cupboard who can't afford dinner. Your intelligence has tricked you into thinking you're exceptional, and the same intelligence is about to torture you for what you've done. The theory works for Napoleon because Napoleon didn't have a conscience, or he had one and could silence it, or he was a sociopath. Whatever the mechanism, Napoleon could step over bodies and keep walking. Raskolnikov can't. He has too much going on inside, too much awareness, too many mirrors reflecting the act back at him. His intelligence, the thing that built the theory, is also the thing that won't let him escape the theory's consequences. There's a scene in the middle of the novel where Raskolnikov lies in bed for days, drifting in and out of fever dreams. Dostoevsky describes the quality of the thoughts, fragmented, obsessive, looping. But Raskolnikov keeps replaying the murder, keeps analyzing it, keeps constructing new justifications and then tearing them down. His mind is doing what it always does, processing, pattern matching, theorizing. But now, it has this thing at the center, this act, and it can't metabolize it. The intelligent mind is a digestion system for experience. It takes in events, breaks them down, extracts meaning, files them away. Most experiences get processed. They become memories, stories, lessons. Some experiences break the system. They're too big, too wrong. The mind keeps returning to them because it can't complete the processing. It's stuck in a loop, running the same algorithms on data that won't resolve. Trauma does this. Guilt does this. The murder has become a splinter in Raskolnikov's consciousness that his intelligence keeps touching, keeps aggravating, can't remove. The detective, Porfiry, understands what's happening. Porfiry is Raskolnikov's intellectual equal, maybe his superior. He figures out Raskolnikov is the murderer almost immediately, not through evidence, through psychology. He reads Raskolnikov the way Raskolnikov reads everyone else. And instead of arresting him, Porfiry waits. He knows Raskolnikov will confess, has to confess. The same mind that conceived the crime will demand resolution. The intelligent man can't live with an open loop. He needs to close it, even if closing it means prison. There's a conversation between them, more of a chess match, where Porfiry basically tells Raskolnikov, "I know you did it. I can't prove it. But you're going to tell me anyway. because you can't stand the not telling, because your mind won't let you carry this. He's right. The confession, when it finally comes, isn't about morality exactly, it's about exhaustion. Raskolnikov has been running the same mental process for months, and he's depleted. Prison sounds like rest. Punishment sounds like resolution. At least it would be over. There's a reading of Crime and Punishment that says it's about redemption. Raskolnikov confesses, goes to Siberia, and through Sonia's love, she's a prostitute with a heart of gold who represents Christian mercy, he finds grace. The epilogue shows him beginning to transform. Almost nobody who reads the novel closely believes this ending. It feels tacked on, obligatory. Like Dostoevsky knew he needed to offer hope and couldn't quite make it convincing. The 400 pages of psychological torture are vivid, precise, unbearable. The redemption is a few pages of summary. He was beginning to feel differently? Sure. The real ending is the confession. The moment the intelligent man finally finds a way to stop thinking, not through resolution, the philosophical questions remain open. Through surrender, he gives up. He hands the problem to someone else, the state, God, anyone. He accepts punishment not because he believes he deserves it, but because he can't carry the weight anymore. This is what intelligence sometimes drives you toward, not success, not solutions. The desperate need to put something down. Raskolnikov's axe is a metaphor, but it's also just an axe. Most intelligent men won't commit murder, but many will recognize the structure. A theory that justifies action. Action that the self can't integrate. The long aftermath of living with what you've done. It might be a relationship you ended through logic, constructing the perfect case for leaving, only to find the guilt doesn't care about your arguments. It might be a career move that made strategic sense and left you hollow. It might be words you said, true words, necessary words, that destroyed something anyway. The intelligent man thinks his way into things. Then he has to live with them. And the living is where the intelligence stops helping. The axe falls. The theory dissolves. You're left with what you actually are, underneath all the reasoning. And sometimes what you are is someone who can't sleep, who replays the moment, who wishes he could unfeel what his mind told him to do. You have an email to send. It's not complicated. A few sentences. Maybe a request, maybe a follow-up, maybe just confirming something. 10 minutes of work, tops. You've been staring at it for an hour. Not because you don't know what to say, because you know too many ways to say it. This word might sound aggressive. That phrase might seem needy. If you're too brief, you're rude. If you're too long, you're desperate. You write a draft, read it back, hear it in their voice, imagine their reaction, delete half of it, rewrite, read it again. The cursor blinks. You adjust a comma. You wonder if you should wait until tomorrow. You check if they're online. You write another draft. Somewhere in the world, a less intelligent person has already sent 5 emails and moved on with their day. This is analysis paralysis. The term comes from business theory. The state where a decision maker has so much information, so many options, so many possible outcomes that they can't commit to any of them. But it's not really about information. It's about the mind that processes information. The intelligent mind sees angles. That's its gift. It can model different perspectives, anticipate consequences, imagine how things might go. It runs simulations. It asks, what if? And, but also. And on the other hand, this is useful for complex problems. It's catastrophic for simple ones, because simple decisions don't need angles. They need commitment. They need someone to pick an option and live with it. The person who sends the imperfect email gets a response. The person who optimizes forever gets nothing. The intelligent mind knows this. It knows that perfectionism is a trap. It knows that good enough is a valid standard. It knows all the productivity advice about shipping, iterating, not letting perfect be the enemy of good. Knowing doesn't help. The paralysis isn't about knowledge. It's about what the mind does with knowledge, which is generate more considerations, more angles, more reasons why this particular decision might be wrong. The Underground Man has a scene that captures this perfectly. Early in the novella, he describes a grudge. An officer once moved him aside on the street, physically relocated him like furniture without even noticing him. A small humiliation. The kind that happens in cities. Most people would forget it. The Underground Man cannot forget it. For 2 years, he nurses this slight. He fantasizes about revenge. See, he'll walk directly at the officer on the Nevsky Prospect and refuse to yield. They'll collide. Shoulders will touch. Honor will be restored. He plans the encounter obsessively. He rehearses it. He buys a new coat so he'll look respectable during the confrontation. He tracks the officer's walking patterns. He knows exactly where and when to position himself, and every time he approaches, he steps aside at the last moment. He can't do it. Not because he's scared exactly, because his mind won't stop seeing. He sees how absurd the gesture is. He sees it from outside. A petty man making a petty point that the other person won't even register. He sees himself seeing it, judges himself for caring, judges himself for the judgment. The layers of self-awareness are so thick he can't push through to the action. When he finally does collide with the officer, after months of failed attempts, the officer doesn't notice. The man just keeps walking. The triumph exists only in the Underground Man's head. That's analysis paralysis in its pure form. The action was never the point. The analysis was the point. The action was just something to analyze. Kierkegaard had a phrase for this: the dizziness of freedom. He was writing about anxiety, trying to figure out what anxiety actually is underneath the symptoms. His answer: anxiety is the awareness of possibility. When you stand at the edge of a cliff, you feel fear of falling. That's straightforward. There's a threat, your body responds, but you also feel something else, something stranger, an awareness that you could jump. Not that you want to, not that you will, but the possibility exists. You have the freedom to do it. And that freedom, that openness, creates its own vertigo. Kierkegaard thought all anxiety worked like this. We're anxious not because of specific threats, but because of the infinite possibilities in front of us. We could do anything. We could be anyone. Every moment contains a choice, and the choice contains a branching future, and the intelligent mind sees the branches spreading endlessly. This is why intelligent people often feel relief when options disappear. The deadline passes. The decision is made for you. The door closes. And instead of grief, you feel something like peace. The burden of possibility is gone. You don't have to choose anymore. The intelligent mind doesn't want more options. It's drowning in options. It wants constraints. It wants someone to say, do this, so it can stop running simulations and just execute. There's a phenomenon in chess called time trouble. Every competitive game has a clock. You have a fixed amount of time to make all your moves. Run out and you lose, no matter how good your position. Beginners lose on time because they're slow, uncertain, still learning to see the board, but strong players lose on time too. Sometimes the strongest players in the most important games. Not because they can't see the right move, because they can see too many moves. A grandmaster looks at a position and generates candidate moves instantly. 10, 15, 20 possibilities, each branching into variations, counter variations, lines that stretch 10 moves deep. The skill that makes them great, the pattern recognition, the calculation ability, becomes a liability when the clock is running. They can always look deeper. There's always another line to check. Bobby Fischer, maybe the greatest chess player who ever lived, reportedly stopped playing serious chess, in part because the game had become unbearable. He could see too far ahead. The possibilities were too vast. He knew moves he'd need to calculate 5-6 years before his opponents would understand them. The distance between his perception and everyone else's made the game lonely. The infinite depth of chess became a kind of hell. That's an extreme case. But the structure is common. The ability to see more becomes the inability to decide. There's a study that gets cited a lot in psychology courses. Researchers set up a table with jam samples. Some days they offered 6 varieties. The other days they offered 24. More options attracted more people to the table, but fewer people actually bought jam. Way fewer. The table with 6 options outsold the table with 24 by a factor of 10. More choice, less action. The researchers called this choice overload. When options multiply, the mind struggles to compare them. Each option requires evaluation. Each evaluation requires criteria. The criteria themselves become debatable, and underneath all of it, there's a mounting anxiety. What if I choose wrong? The intelligent person is walking through life at the 24 jam table. Every decision is surrounded by options. The options generate considerations. The considerations generate counter-considerations. And the jam spoils while you're standing there calculating. Here's the thing nobody tells you. Most decisions don't matter that much. Not in the sense that nothing matters, but in the sense that the difference between option A and option B is usually smaller than you think. The email you send, the restaurant you choose, the job you take, there's a version of your life where you chose differently, and that version is probably about as good as this one. The intelligent mind resists this. It wants to believe that correct choices exist, that with enough analysis you can find the optimal path, that the stakes justify the paralysis, but optimization is often a mirage. You're not choosing between good and bad, you're choosing between different goods, different trade-offs, different unknowns. The analysis doesn't converge on an answer because there isn't an answer. Just options with different shapes. The person who chooses quickly isn't being reckless. They've understood something the analyzer hasn't, that choosing is more important than choosing correctly. That action generates information, that you learn by doing, not by simulating. The intelligent man knows this. He's read the books on decision-making, he understands the theory, and he still can't send the email. There's a psychological concept called ego depletion. The idea that willpower is a finite resource that gets exhausted through use. The research on this is contested now. The original findings didn't replicate well. But there's something in the concept that feels true, especially for overthinkers. Every decision costs something. Every consideration drains a little energy. And the intelligent mind, by generating more considerations, burns through the resource faster. By the end of the day, you're depleted, not from physical labor, not from emotional stress, from the sheer cognitive load of running your own mind. The inbox isn't that full. The tasks aren't that hard, but your head has been going all day, analyzing everything, and you're exhausted. This is why intelligent people often have rituals. Routines, the same breakfast, the same clothes, the same route to work. It's not lack of imagination, it's conservation. If you automate the small decisions, you have resources left for the big ones. Although, and here's the trap, you'll probably analyze the big ones until you're depleted too. The Underground Man has a line that cuts to the heart of this. He says, "The direct, legitimate, immediate fruit of consciousness is inertia. That is, the conscious sitting with folded hands." Inertia, or not as laziness but as logical outcome, If you see enough angles, you can't move. Every direction has objections. Every choice has costs. The fully conscious person, the one who hides nothing from himself, who follows every thread, arrives at paralysis as the only honest response. This is what intelligent people feel and rarely say. The paralysis isn't a failure of their intelligence. It's a product of it. The same capacity that lets them see clearly is the thing that freezes them. They're not paralyzed despite being smart. They're paralyzed because they're smart. The dumb move, the obvious choice, the just do it approach, that requires a certain blindness. You have to not see the objections. You have to have faith in action that the analyzer doesn't have. The intelligent man sees too much to have that faith, and so he sits with folded hands, conscious, inert, watching the simple people make simple decisions and wondering what it would feel like to be them. There's a way out, but it's not pleasant. You have to accept being wrong, not as a possibility, as a certainty. You will choose badly sometimes. You will send the awkward email, take the wrong job, say the thing you'll regret. The analysis won't protect you. The paralysis won't save you. You're going to make mistakes. The question is whether you make mistakes while doing things, or make the meta mistake of doing nothing. Intelligent people resist this. They've built an identity around being right, being careful, being the one who sees what others miss. The idea of acting with incomplete information, accepting suboptimal outcomes, feels like a betrayal of what makes them. But it's the only way the jam gets bought, the only way the email gets sent, the only way the life gets lived. Dostoevsky understood this. The underground man is paralyzed because he won't accept imperfection. Raskolnikov acts and discovers that action doesn't solve the problem. But at least he's in the world, at least he's in motion. The motion is painful, but it's something. The cursor blinks. The options multiply. The mind runs its simulations. At some point you have to click send. The underground man is paralyzed by small things. Raskolnikov is destroyed by one big thing. But there's another kind of intelligent suffering in Dostoevsky, the kind that comes from looking at the whole picture, not at your own life, at existence itself, at the structure of the universe, and finding it unacceptable. Even Karamazov does this, and what breaks him isn't murder or paralysis. It's that he sees too clearly how the world is built, and he can't forgive whoever built it. The Brothers Karamazov is Dostoevsky's last novel, his longest, the one he considered his masterpiece. It's about three brothers, Dmitri, Ivan, Alyosha, and their father Fyodor, a grotesque old man who gets murdered partway through. But the murder is almost beside the point. The novel is really about three ways of being human. Or Dmitri is passion. He lives in his body, his desires, his explosive emotions. Alyosha is faith. He's a novice monk, gentle, trying to love the world as it is. Ivan is intellect. Ivan is the one who went to university, who writes articles, who thinks. And Ivan has a problem that all his thinking can't solve. The world contains suffering that shouldn't exist. Not his suffering. He could handle that. The suffering of innocence, of children. There's a chapter in the Brothers Karamazov called Rebellion. It's one of the most famous pieces of writing in any language. People who've never read Dostoevsky know this chapter. Ivan is talking to Alyosha. They're at a tavern. And Ivan starts describing cases of cruelty to children. Not fictional cases, real ones drawn from Russian newspapers of the time. Dostoevsky did his research. Well, these things happened. A 5-year-old girl tortured by her parents. They beat her, locked her in an outhouse in the freezing cold, made her eat her own excrement. Ivan describes her praying at night. A child who doesn't understand why this is happening to her, crying out to dear kind God to protect her. No protection comes. A serf boy, 8 years old, who threw a stone while playing and accidentally hurt the paw of a general's favorite hunting dog. The general had the boy stripped naked, had him chased by the entire pack of hounds in front of his mother. The dogs tore him apart. Ivan doesn't raise his voice. He's not ranting. He presents these cases carefully, precisely, the way a prosecutor presents evidence. And then he asks Alyosha a question. If you could create a perfect world, a world of total harmony, total happiness, so it's the final redemption of all suffering, but the price was that one child had to be tortured, would you accept? Alyosha whispers, no. Ivan says, that's my point. The harmony isn't worth it. No future paradise justifies what happened to that girl in the outhouse. No divine plan that explains everything makes it okay that the boy was torn apart by dogs. It's not God I don't accept, Ivan says. It's the world he created that I return to him. I return the ticket. This is the intelligent man's rebellion. Not against rules or society or even God directly. Against the terms of existence. Ivan isn't an atheist exactly. He's willing to grant, for the sake of argument, that God exists. That there's a plan. That everything will be redeemed in the end. Every tear wiped away. Every suffering explained. Some final harmony that makes sense of it all. He just doesn't want it. The price is too high. If the harmony requires children to suffer, he'd rather have disharmony. If understanding requires accepting what happened to that girl, he'd rather not understand. He returns the ticket to the show. He opts out of the cosmic scheme. This is what intelligence does when it looks at the whole. It notices things that can't be unseen. The girl praying for help that doesn't come. The mother watching her son destroyed. These aren't abstractions to Ivan. They're facts. And facts demand a response. The unintelligent person can shrug, can say God's ways are mysterious and move on, can compartmentalize, forget, focus on their own life. Ivan can't. His mind holds the images. His mind demands coherence, and the coherence doesn't come. Where immediately after the rebellion chapter comes the Grand Inquisitor. It's a poem Ivan has written, or imagined, he tells Alyosha. A story. Christ returns to earth. It's Seville, 16th century, the height of the Inquisition. He walks among the people, performing miracles, drawing crowds. Everyone recognizes him. The Grand Inquisitor, an old cardinal, 90 years old, has Christ arrested. And then the Inquisitor explains why Christ was wrong. This is the heart of it. Christ offered freedom. He came to make people free, free to choose, free to believe, free to love God without compulsion. He rejected the devil's temptations in the wilderness. He refused to turn stones into bread, refused to throw himself from the temple, refused to rule all the kingdoms of the world. The Inquisitor says this was a mistake. People don't want freedom. They can't handle it. Freedom is a burden. The dizziness Kierkegaard described. People want bread, they want miracles, they want authority, they want someone to tell them what to do, someone to bow down to, someone to unite around. The Church has corrected Christ's error. It has taken the burden of freedom away. It provides bread, mystery, authority. It gives people what they actually need, not what Christ idealistically thought they should want. We have corrected your work, the Inquisitor says, and people are happy now, happier than they were under freedom. Christ says nothing throughout. At the end, he kisses the Inquisitor on his bloodless lips. The Inquisitor opens the cell door and tells him to go. Go and come no more. What is this poem about? On one level, it's about the Church. A critique of religious institutions that trade spiritual freedom for worldly power. Dostoevsky had complicated feelings about organized religion, and this chapter contains them. But on another level, it's about the intelligent man's dilemma. The Inquisitor is intelligent. He sees people clearly. He knows they can't handle freedom. He knows the truth would crush them. So he builds lies, benevolent lies, effective lies, lies that allow people to live in peace. Ivan recognizes himself in the Inquisitor, the intelligent person who sees that most people need illusions, who understands that truth is a burden, who faces a choice. Tell people the truth and watch them suffer, or construct comfortable myths and let them rest. The Inquisitor chose the myths. He became the manager of humanity's delusions. He took on the weight of knowledge so others didn't have to. And he's miserable. That's implied throughout. He doesn't believe in the heaven he promises. He's damned himself so others could feel saved. This is where intelligence leads if you follow it far enough, to the question of what you do with what you see. If you see that people are weak, that freedom terrifies them, that they'd rather be told what to believe. Do you give them the truth anyway? Do you let them struggle, or do you become the Inquisitor, building cages that feel like cathedrals? There's a philosopher named Albert Camus who called Ivan the most important character in modern literature. Camus spent his life working on the problem Ivan raised. How do you live in a world that doesn't make sense? Or his essay, The Myth of Sisyphus, is basically a response to Ivan's rebellion, an attempt to find a way through the absurdity without surrendering to it or denying it. Camus' answer was defiance. Sisyphus pushing the boulder up the hill, watching it roll down, walking back to push it again, forever. And in that eternal struggle, finding something, not meaning exactly, but engagement, presence, the refusal to quit even though quitting would be rational. One must imagine Sisyphus happy, Camus wrote. It's a strange line. Happiness isn't quite the right word, but there's something in the struggle itself that matters. The boulder is absurd, the task is pointless, and still you push, still you're here, still you're doing something rather than nothing. This is Camus' answer to Ivan. You don't have to accept the ticket. You don't have to believe the harmony justifies the suffering, but you also don't have to stop living. You can rebel and continue. You can see the absurdity clearly and push the boulder anyway. Whether this is satisfying depends on who you are. For some intelligent people, Camus offers a way through. For others, it feels like a trick, a way of pretending the problem is solved when it isn't. Ivan doesn't find Camus' solution. He finds something else. By the end of The Brothers Karamazov, Ivan is going mad. It happens gradually and then suddenly. He's been wrestling with his ideas, with his rebellion, with what it means to reject the world's terms. And then his servant, Smerdikov, confesses to murdering their father and claims he did it because Ivan's philosophy justified it. All things are permitted. That was Ivan's idea. If there's no God, no ultimate judgment, then morality is a convention. You can do anything. Smerdikov took him literally. Ivan didn't mean it literally. He was philosophizing, exploring ideas. But the ideas escaped. They had consequences he didn't intend. And now his father is dead, and the murderer is quoting Ivan's own words back to him. This breaks something. Ivan starts hallucinating. He sees the devil, or a devil, a shabby middle-aged man who speaks in Ivan's own voice, makes Ivan's own arguments, mocks him with his own sophistication. The devil is Ivan's intellect externalized, and it's tormenting him. The scene is terrifying because the devil doesn't say anything Ivan doesn't already know. Every argument, every objection, every clever point, they're all Ivan's. He's being tortured by his own mind. The intelligence that built the rebellion is now the thing he can't escape. Dostoevsky isn't subtle about the distribution of fates. Dmitri, the passionate brother, is arrested for the murder he didn't commit. He'll go to Siberia, but he's strangely at peace. He accepts his suffering. He even sees it as purification, a way of paying for his sins, real and imagined. He'll survive. Alyosha, the faithful brother, walks out into the world. He leaves the monastery as his elder father Zosima instructed. He'll get married, have children, live a life of active love. He'll struggle, but he'll be okay. Ivan, the intelligent brother, collapses. The mind that saw everything, that built the perfect rebellion, that asked the unanswerable questions. It breaks. He ends the novel in fever, possibly dying, certainly destroyed. You could read this as Dostoevsky punishing the intellectual. The believer is rewarded, the thinker is punished. But I think it's more descriptive than prescriptive. Dostoevsky is showing what intelligence, pushed to its limit, actually does to a person. Dmitri doesn't think enough to be destroyed by thought. Alyosha has faith, a flaw beneath his mind, something that catches him before he falls forever. Ivan has nothing but the mind, and the mind, turned on existence itself, finds no resting place. It can question anything. It can undermine anything. It can rebel against the fundamental terms of being alive. Where does that leave you? In a room, hallucinating the devil, arguing with yourself, watching your ideas escape and do damage, waiting for a breakdown that's been building since you first started taking your own thoughts seriously. The question Ivan asks is the question every intelligent person eventually asks. Is this acceptable? Not, is my life acceptable? That's a smaller question. Is the whole thing acceptable? The world where children are tortured? The world where the innocent suffer and the guilty prosper? The world that contains the facts Ivan recites, the facts you know too, the facts that sit in your memory and don't get processed because there's no way to process them. Most people don't sit with this question. They have defenses. Faith, distraction, the simple busyness of living. The intelligent mind keeps circling back. It keeps noticing. It keeps failing to accept. Ivan returned the ticket. He said no to the terms, and the no consumed him. There might be a way to say no and survive. Camus thought so. Maybe some intelligent people find it. But Ivan didn't. And the honesty of Dostoevsky is that he doesn't pretend Ivan should have. He just shows where the road leads. The brilliant, uncompromising, devastating road. Some minds walk it. Not all of them come back. There's a character in Dostoevsky who takes intelligence to its endpoint. Not paralysis, not rebellion, not breakdown, suicide. His name is Kirillov. He appears in Demons, a novel about political radicals and nihilists in a provincial Russian town. But Kirillov isn't political. He's not interested in revolution or social change. He's interested in one question, and the question has consumed him completely. The question is, what would prove that humans are truly free? Kirillov is an engineer. He builds bridges. He's good at his job. Methodical, precise, technically skilled. When you meet him in the novel, he seems almost cheerful. He does gymnastics. He plays with a rubber ball. He likes children. He's also decided to kill himself. Not because he's depressed. Not because life is painful. Not because anything is particularly wrong. But he's killing himself to prove a point. The logic goes like this. The fear of death is what enslaves humanity. Everything we do, religion, morality, achievement, meaning-making, is ultimately driven by terror of non-existence. We believe in God because we can't face the void. We follow rules because we're afraid of consequences. We're slaves, all of us, to the fear of dying. But what if someone could overcome that fear? What if someone could kill themselves freely? Not from despair, not from pain, but from pure will. That person would prove that death has no power. They would demonstrate ultimate freedom. They would become, in Kirillov's phrase, the man-god. If God exists, Kirillov reasons, then all is his will and I cannot escape his will. But if God does not exist, then all is my will. And I am bound to express my will. How do you express absolute will? By doing the thing that will refuses most, ending yourself. Not because you have to, because you choose to. This is intelligence at its most terrifying, airtight and self-annihilating. Kirillov's argument isn't crazy. That's the problem. Given his premises, his conclusion follows. If freedom is the highest value and fear is the ultimate constraint, then overcoming fear through deliberate death is the ultimate act of freedom. The logic holds together. You can object to the premises. You can say, freedom isn't the highest value, or that there are other ways to overcome fear. But you can't say, Kirillov is being irrational. He's being hyper-rational. He's following his ideas where they lead, with the same precision he brings to building bridges, and where they lead is off a cliff. Dostoevsky puts Kirillov in a novel full of destruction. Demons is about a group of revolutionaries who tear apart a small town. They manipulate, betray, murder. They're driven by ideology, half-understood ideas about social transformation that justify any means. By the end, multiple people are dead and nothing has been achieved. The revolution was always a fantasy. The destruction was real. Kirillov isn't one of the revolutionaries. He's adjacent to them, pulled into their schemes. But his project is different. They want to change society. He wants to change the nature of human existence. They're playing politics. He's playing metaphysics. But there's a connection. Both Kirillov and the revolutionaries have been captured by ideas. They've followed thoughts to their logical conclusions, and the conclusions are lethal. The revolutionaries kill others. Kirillov kills himself. The mechanism is the same. Intelligence that serves the idea rather than the life. There's something almost noble about Kirillov. That's what's disturbing. He's not a villain. He's not even tragic in the usual sense. He's genuinely trying to do something for humanity, to demonstrate a freedom that will liberate everyone, to be the first man-god so that others can follow. He's wrong, probably, certainly. His suicide won't liberate anyone. It will be folded into the revolutionaries' scheme. They plan to use his death to cover up their own crimes. His grand gesture will be co-opted, misunderstood, forgotten, but he doesn't know that. He dies believing he's doing something meaningful. He dies with a kind of peace that the other characters don't have. Dostoevsky lets you feel the pull of Kirillov's logic. He doesn't make it easy to dismiss. If you've ever thought seriously about freedom, about death, about what it would mean to truly not be afraid, you've been on the edges of Kirillov's territory. Most people step back. They find reasons to reject the premises, or they simply don't follow the logic that far. But the path exists. Intelligence can walk it. There's a philosopher named Emil Cioran who spent his life in Kirillov's neighborhood. Cioran was Romanian, wrote mostly in French, and produced books with titles like The Trouble with Being Born and A Short History of Decay. He's the most pessimistic philosopher who ever lived. Schopenhauer looks like a motivational speaker by comparison, and Cioran wrote about suicide constantly, obsessively, not because he wanted to kill himself exactly, because thinking about suicide was how he survived. It is not worth the bother of killing yourself, he wrote, since you always kill yourself too late. And only optimists commit suicide, optimists who no longer succeed at being optimists. And most famously, without the idea of suicide, I'd have killed myself long ago. This is strange logic, but it's real. For Cioran, the thought of suicide was a relief valve. Knowing he could always exit made staying bearable. The door was there. He didn't have to go through it. but knowing it was unlocked let him sit in the room. Kirillov doesn't use suicide as a relief valve. He uses it as a destination. That's the difference. Sioran circled the idea forever, finding in the circling a way to continue. Kirillov walks straight toward it because the logic demands completion. Why does intelligence lead here? Because intelligence asks why and doesn't stop. Why should I live? Because life is good. Why is life good? Because of pleasure, connection, meaning. Why do those matter? Because they do. Because we're built to value them. But we're built to value them isn't an answer. It's a description of the situation. The intelligent mind notices. I value these things because evolution shaped me to value them. Not because they're objectively valuable, not because the universe cares, because my brain chemistry rewards certain experiences and punishes others. This is the abyss that Nietzsche talked about. You look into it and it looks back. The reasons for living turn out to be mechanisms, and mechanisms don't justify anything, they just run. Most people don't follow this chain very far. They stop at because life is good or because I want to. They don't need ultimate justification. Proximate justification is enough. The intelligent mind keeps pulling the thread. It wants foundations, bedrock, something that holds. And there's nothing there. Just more mechanisms. Just more because that's how brains work. Kirillov reached the bottom and found it empty. His suicide is an attempt to do something, anything, that isn't just mechanism. To act from will rather than programming. To prove that he's more than a system following rules. It's absurd. You can't prove freedom by destroying the thing that would be free. The will that wills its own extinction isn't demonstrating freedom. It's demonstrating that ideas can capture a mind so completely that the mind forgets what ideas are for. But the absurdity doesn't make the logic wrong. It just makes the logic inhuman. And intelligence, followed far enough, often arrives at inhuman places. There were reports, after Demons was published, of readers attempting Kirillov's experiment. Copycats. People who read the novel, found the logic compelling and decided to follow it. Dostoevsky was disturbed by this, but not surprised. He knew the power of an idea that fits a certain kind of mind. This is the danger of putting certain thoughts on paper. Most readers will engage with them as fiction, as philosophy, as entertainment. They'll feel the pull and step back, but some won't. Some will recognize in Kirillov something they've already been thinking. See, and the novel will give them permission, or a framework, or a justification that tips them from thinking into acting. Dostoevsky put Kirillov in a novel about nihilism and terrorism. He surrounded him with destruction. He made clear that the revolutionary project fails, that the ideas lead to ruin. He wasn't endorsing Kirillov, but he let Kirillov make his case, fully, persuasively. He didn't strawman the argument or make Kirillov a grotesque. He made him human, even sympathetic. Because Dostoevsky was an honest writer, and honest writing means giving the devil his due. The devil in this case is the thought that maybe none of this is worth it. That maybe the fear keeping you alive is just fear, not wisdom. That maybe the ultimate freedom is the freedom to stop. Here's what Kirillov gets wrong, or what I think he gets wrong, which is different from being sure. He assumes that freedom is proved by a single act, one suicide, one demonstration, and the case is closed. But that's not how freedom works. Freedom isn't a theorem you prove once, it's a practice. Something you do repeatedly in small ways every time you choose something over something else. Kirillov wants to prove freedom by exiting the game, but freedom is in the playing, the choosing, the ongoing negotiation between what you want and what you do. You can't prove you're free by removing yourself from the conditions where freedom happens. This is Camus's critique, essentially. You don't defeat the absurd by surrendering to it. You defeat it, or at least you fight it, by continuing despite it. The suicide isn't freedom. It's the termination of the only place freedom could exist. But, Kirillov would say, that's just life's mechanism talking. The survival instinct dressing itself up as philosophy. You want to keep playing because you're programmed to keep playing. Your freedom in the playing is just what slavery feels like from the inside. And I don't have a knockdown response to that. Neither did Camus. Not really. One must imagine Sisyphus happy isn't an argument. It's a stance, a decision to continue that doesn't rest on proof. Maybe that's all any of us have. Decisions that don't rest on proof. Choices to continue that can't be justified at the deepest level. The intelligent mind wants something more solid. Kirillov wanted something more solid. And when he didn't find it, he decided the only honest response was to stop. The question Kirillov leaves behind is the question, why not? Not why live? That's the question people usually ask. Why not die is different. It puts the burden of proof on continuing. It asks you to justify something you usually take for granted. Most people never seriously confront this question. They don't need to. The momentum of life carries them. The next meal, the next show, the next conversation. They're not deciding to live, they're just living. The intelligent mind pauses. It notices that living is a choice, that every moment is implicitly a decision to continue. And it asks, on what grounds? Kirillov couldn't find grounds that satisfied him. His standards were too high. He wanted ultimate justification, not proximate. He wanted proof, not practice. And when the grounds weren't there, he followed his logic to its conclusion. I don't think most intelligent people end up like Kirillov. The path exists, but most don't walk it all the way. They find off-ramps, love, work, curiosity, the simple animal pleasure of being alive. They decide, consciously or not, that the question, why not, doesn't need a perfect answer, that living can be its own reason. But the path exists. And intelligence, if it's honest, has to acknowledge the path, has to feel the pull of the logic, even if it doesn't follow. Dostoevsky felt it. You can tell from how carefully he drew Kirillov, how much space he gave the argument. He wasn't writing from ignorance. He was writing from the inside, from the place where these thoughts live. The sickness of consciousness includes this room. The room where you ask why you're still here and the answers seem thin. The room Kirillov never left. Most of us visit and leave. We tell ourselves we've refuted the logic, or we just stop thinking about it. We take the off-ramps, we keep going. But the room is always there. The question is always there. And intelligence knows it. So far, this has been a catalogue of destruction. The underground man, paralyzed. Raskolnikov, tormented, even, broken. Kirillov, dead by his own logic. If intelligence only led to suffering, the solution would be simple. Be stupid. Don't think. Don't look. Stay in the comfortable fog where most people live. But Dostoevsky didn't believe that. He wasn't anti-intellectual, even as he diagnosed intelligence as a sickness. He thought there was something on the other side. Not a cure, but a way through. And he spent his last novels trying to show what it looked like. The answer isn't stupidity, it's something harder to name. In The Idiot, Dostoevsky tried to write what he called a positively beautiful man. His name is Prince Mishkin. He's just returned to Russia after years in a Swiss sanatorium being treated for epilepsy. He's gentle, innocent, almost childlike. He says what he means without calculation. He doesn't see social dynamics the way other people do, or rather he sees through them to something underneath. Everyone calls him the idiot. In Russian, the word also means holy fool, someone touched by something beyond ordinary understanding, someone who operates by different rules. Mishkin isn't stupid. That's the first thing to understand. He's perceptive in ways other characters aren't. He reads people accurately. He sees Nastasia Filipovna's suffering when everyone else sees only her beauty or her scandal. He understands things that the sophisticated characters miss because their sophistication gets in the way. What Mishkin lacks isn't intelligence, it's the interference pattern. The interference pattern is what the underground man has in abundance. The constant self-monitoring, the awareness of how you appear, the anticipation of judgment, the second-guessing that turns every action into a performance observed by an internal critic. Mishkin doesn't have this. He acts directly. He says what he thinks. When someone asks him a question, he answers it honestly, fully, without calculating the effect. It's disarming. People don't know what to do with him. There's a scene early in the novel where Mishkin meets the Yapanchin family. They're upper class, sophisticated, suspicious of this strange man who's appeared from nowhere. They test him, they probe, and Mishkin just answers. He tells them about his illness. He tells them about watching an execution in France. A long, detailed, disturbing description that no socially aware person would offer at a first meeting. The family is horrified and fascinated. They've never met anyone like this, someone who doesn't play the game. What would it be like to not play the game? To say what you think without running it through 17 filters? To respond to the moment instead of to your model of how others will perceive the moment? To be here now, with whatever's in front of you, without the constant overlay of analysis. This is what Mishkin offers as an alternative. Not stupidity, presence, not ignorance, directness. The mind is still there, the perception is still there. What's missing is the reflexive loop that turns everything into content for self-evaluation. The intelligent person is always slightly outside their experience, observing it. Mishkin is inside, fully, for better and worse. The worse matters. Mishkin fails. He can't save Nastasia Filipovna. He can't prevent the tragedy. His goodness is no match for the forces around him. Rogozhin's obsession, Nastasia's self-destruction, the cruelty of society. By the end of the novel, Nastasia is murdered and Mishkin is catatonic. He returns to the Swiss sanatorium, his mind gone. Dostoevsky doesn't pretend innocence is a solution. The world eats innocence. Mishkin's directness, his lack of defenses, makes him vulnerable in ways the sophisticated person isn't. He feels everything. He can't protect himself from what he feels, and eventually it destroys him. So what's the point? If Mishkin ends up broken too, how is he an answer to anything? Maybe the point isn't the ending. Maybe it's the quality of the time before the ending. Mishkin, for all his suffering, is alive in a way the underground man isn't. He connects with people. He experiences beauty. He loves, even if the love leads to disaster. His life has texture, presence, moments of real contact. The underground man has none of this. He's preserved. Nothing touches him because he lets nothing in. He survives, if you can call it survival, but what he survives for is unclear. Mishkin burns brightly and burns out. The underground man smolders forever. Which is better? Dostoevsky doesn't say. He shows both. He lets you choose. In Brothers Karamazov, Dostoevsky tries again. Alyosha is his final attempt at a positive figure. Unlike Mishkin, Alyosha isn't destroyed. He's still standing at the end of the novel, diminished by grief, shaken by doubt, but standing. How? Alyosha has intelligence. He follows Ivan's arguments. He understands the Grand Inquisitor. He feels the force of the rebellion. He's not a simpleton who believes because he can't think. But Alyosha has something else underneath: faith. Not blind faith, not the faith that refuses to hear objections. Faith that has heard the objections and continues anyway. Father Zosima, his spiritual mentor, doesn't shield Alyosha from hard questions. He tells Alyosha to leave the monastery, to go into the world, to get married, to have children, to live in the mess rather than retreat from it. Zosima's teaching is simple and almost impossible. Love in action is a harsh and dreadful thing compared to love in dreams. Love in dreams is what the intelligent man does. He imagines perfect relationships. He theorizes about connection. He constructs elaborate internal models of what love should be. And then actual people, so with their flaws and demands and inconvenient realities, can't match the model. Love in action is different. It's showing up. It's changing diapers. It's listening when you'd rather be thinking. It's the 1,000 small acts that don't make sense from a distance but constitute a life up close. The intelligent mind resists this. It wants to understand love before it does love. It wants a theory of relationships before it risks one. It wants guarantees that action won't lead to pain. There are no guarantees. Zosima knows this. He's telling Alyosha, you can't think your way to a good life. You can't solve existence from the outside. You have to be in it, making mistakes, getting hurt, doing the work anyway. This isn't anti-intellectual. It's a different use of intelligence. Not intelligence as a defense mechanism at keeping the world at a distance. Intelligence in service of engagement. You think so you can act better, not so you can avoid acting. There's a moment near the end of Brothers Karamazov that Dostoevsky intended as the emotional climax. Alyosha is outside the monastery, grieving Father Zosima's death. He's in crisis, doubting everything, feeling abandoned. He falls asleep and has a vision. Zosima at the wedding at Cana, where Christ turned water into wine. Zosima is joyful. He tells Alyosha that joy is possible, that life is worth it. Alyosha wakes up and walks outside. He looks at the stars, and something happens. Something Dostoevsky describes as Alyosha's soul touching other worlds. He falls to the ground, weeping, kissing the earth. He rises a different person. What happened? It's hard to say. So Dostoevsky doesn't make it a logical transformation. It's not an argument that convinces Alyosha. It's an experience of beauty, of connection, of something larger than his suffering. The intelligent mind is suspicious of such experiences. They can't be verified. They can't be reproduced on demand. They might be brain chemistry, wish fulfillment, self-deception. But they happen. To some people, sometimes. And the people they happen to are changed. Alyosha has such an experience. Mishkin has them. He describes moments before his epileptic seizures as glimpses of absolute beauty, moments he'd trade his whole life for. Even Ivan has them, though he fights them. The sickness of consciousness is real, but so are these breaks in the sickness. These moments when the analysis stops and something else comes through. Section 9, living with it. There's no cure. Let's just say that clearly. The intelligent mind doesn't get fixed. The seeing doesn't stop. The analysis doesn't end. If you've spent this video recognizing yourself, in the underground man's paralysis, in Raskolnikov's torment, in Ivan's rebellion, in the 3 a.m. ceiling staring, that recognition isn't going to disappear. You are what you are. The mind you have is the mind you have. But there's a difference between suffering and suffering badly, between carrying the weight and being crushed by it. Dostoevsky knew this difference. He lived it. Dostoevsky's biography is a catalogue of disasters. His mother died when he was 15. His father was murdered by his own serfs, beaten to death, when Dostoevsky was 17. He was arrested for participating in a socialist discussion group, or sentenced to death and taken to the firing squad before being pardoned at the last moment. He spent 4 years in a Siberian prison camp and another 4 in military exile. He was epileptic. The seizures were severe. He described the moments before them as glimpses of absolute clarity. I would give my whole life for this moment. But the aftermath was days of depression, confusion, and pain. He was a gambling addict. He lost everything repeatedly. He wrote some of his greatest novels under desperate deadlines to pay off gambling debts. He pawned his wife's possessions. He promised to stop and didn't. The addiction followed the same pattern as the underground man's spite, self-destruction as a perverse assertion of freedom. His first marriage was miserable. His first wife cuckolded him and died slowly of tuberculosis. And 2 of his children died young. His daughter Sonia at 3 months, his son Alexei at 3 years. He wrote letters of inconsolable grief, and through all of it he wrote, "That's not a prescription. Just right isn't advice. Most people don't have Dostoevsky's talent, and talent isn't something you choose. But there's something in what he did that might generalize. He took the unbearable and made it into something. He didn't escape his mind, he used it. The same capacity that tortured him was the capacity that produced the novels. The underground man's spite became notes from underground. The gambling addiction became the gambler. The grief over his son's death became the chapters about children in brothers Karamazov. The firing squad became Prince Mishkin's description of execution. Nothing was wasted. Everything was material. This isn't healing. Dostoevsky wasn't healed. He struggled with depression, with addiction, with the sickness of consciousness until the end. But he struggled productively. He made the struggle mean something beyond itself. Maybe that's the closest thing to an answer. Meaning-making. Not finding meaning, as if it's out there, waiting to be discovered. Making it. Constructing something from the raw material of experience. Taking the suffering and building with it. Viktor Frankl, the psychiatrist who survived Auschwitz, wrote about this. He watched people in the camps. Some gave up and died, others found ways to continue. The difference wasn't intelligence or strength. It was whether they had something to live for, a task waiting, a person to see again, something that needed them. He who has a why can bear almost any how, Frankl wrote. But quoting Nietzsche, the intelligent person's curse is that they can deconstruct any why. They can see through purposes, reveal them as constructions, show that nothing is objectively meaningful. But maybe that's the wrong frame. Maybe meaning doesn't need to be objective to be real. Maybe the construction is the point. You build purposes. You decide what matters. You create reasons because reasons don't exist on their own. The intelligent mind can deconstruct and can construct. The same capacity works both ways. The question is which direction you point it. Dostoevsky, in his last years, was happier than he'd ever been. Not ecstatically happy, not cured of his darkness, but something had settled. He was married to Anna, who managed his life with a competence he never had. He was writing Brothers Karamazov, which he knew was his best work. He was famous, respected, invited to speak at the unveiling of the Pushkin Monument in Moscow, where his speech received a standing ovation. He still had seizures. He still struggled with his demons. But there was also something else. Gratitude, maybe, the sense of having come through. He died at 59, a few months after finishing Brothers Karamazov. His last words reportedly were to Anna. "Remember, Anna, I have always loved you and have never been unfaithful to you, not even in thought." Whether that's true, whether he was faithful even in thought, doesn't matter. What matters is that he wanted it to be true. He wanted to have been good. After everything. After all the darkness he'd seen and written and lived, he wanted goodness. The intelligent man can want this. The sickness doesn't prevent it. The analysis doesn't preclude it. You can see clearly and still want goodness, still reach for it, still fail and reach again. Here's what I think Dostoevsky figured out, though he'd never say it this plainly. You're not going to stop seeing. The patterns will keep appearing. The objections will keep generating. The 3 a.m. thoughts will keep coming. But you can do something with what you see. You can make something from it. Not to solve it. There's no solving. But to transmute it. To turn the suffering into material. To build meaning rather than waiting for it to appear. And you can act, despite the paralysis. Despite the seeing of every side. At some point you click send. You walk toward the thing you're afraid of. You do the love in action, not just the love in dreams. You'll still suffer. You'll still lie awake. You'll still feel the weight of consciousness as a burden that others seem to carry more lightly. But you won't only suffer. There will be moments, not constant, not guaranteed, but real, when the analysis stops and something else comes through. Beauty, connection, the strange gratitude for being alive at all, even though being alive hurts. Dostoevsky had those moments. Between the seizures and the debts and the deaths, he had them, and he wrote about them, and he left the writing behind. The video started with 3 dots blinking. Someone typing. Your mind running every possible scenario in the 11 seconds before the message arrives. That's real. That's what the intelligent mind does. It will keep doing it. You can't make it stop. But somewhere in you, underneath all the analysis, there's something that still wants, still hopes, still reaches toward connection despite knowing how badly it can go. That's real too. Dostoevsky called consciousness a sickness. He was right. But he kept living with the sickness. He kept writing. He kept loving badly and well. He kept reaching toward goodness even as he documented all the ways goodness fails. The sickness doesn't have a cure, but it has a use. And using it, making something from it, building rather than just deconstructing, acting rather than just analyzing. That's the closest thing to an answer anyone's found. Not a solution, a practice. The cursor blinks. The analysis runs. And somewhere, despite everything, you click send.